Another evening of open classroom. As you may know, last week we had the wonderful opportunity to listen to Julie Burrows, the new arts director for the city of Boston, recently new to Boston from Chicago, and Colette Phillips of Get Connected. And we looked at arts, we looked at culture, and we asked, what's the role of arts and culture in a city like Boston? Tonight we're going to change roles and we're going to take a look at the whole question of urban sports, but particularly the 2024 Olympic bid. And we have with us tonight, we still hope to have Rich Davey, who is the former Secretary of Transportation and the new President, CEO of Boston 2024. He is in a meeting right now with Mayor Walsh, talking about the finances with FinCom. But we have Aaron Murphy joining us, who's the Chief Operating Officer, and Doug Rubin is on his way. He's just a few minutes away. As many of you may know, Doug has played a role in many campaigns in Boston and in Massachusetts. He was campaign manager for Deval Patrick, and I think he also worked in Elizabeth Warren's campaign, and he's now helping out on this campaign as well. I want to introduce it by telling you my own feelings about this, and they may make you think a little bit more about this, because I expect we're going to have a really good back and forth on this issue. I can't think of any issue right now, with the exception of people who are angry about what we had in terms of snowfall and removal of the snow, that is more controversial right now than the Boston Olympics bid. We've had nearly nonstop coverage in the Boston Globe and in the news media, both pro and con. The Boston Olympic Committee has been working nonstop to try and get the story out, as has the No to the Olympics Committee, which has been dogging the Olympic bid ever since, which I think is healthy. I started out, personally, as a fairly violent opponent of the Olympics. I felt, as many of the No campaign was saying, is that we've got enough problems here in Boston, enough challenges, despite all the other good things we've talked about this semester, about affordable housing, obviously transportation, workforce development, inequality, early childhood education, the quality of our schools, the quality of after-school programs. Why, with so many of these issues unresolved, would we want to take on something as big and brash as an Olympic bid? And I thought about that for a while, and I had fairly strong feelings about that until I had the opportunity to listen to a former head of the Boston Olympic bid, Dan O'Connell, at a meeting sponsored by City to City, in which he laid out his own position on why this was a good idea. And I started thinking about it, and I realized that many of the arguments that Dan was making and the Olympic Committee leaders were making are, in fact, in my feeling, to my way of thinking, valid. And what it is that I have been working, some of you know this, you may have seen we've had a lot of press this last week, almost every day in the Globe, another story about housing and our housing report card that we reported to you earlier this semester about. And I've been frustrated by the fact that for 20 or 30 years, we've been working to improve our transportation. For at least that long, we've been trying to improve and get the affordable housing we need. For many of those years, we've been working hard to get the workforce training, particularly for young people, in places like Dorchester and Roxbury and Mattapan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we keep hitting our head against the wall and making very little progress. Rents going up faster than ever before. We're losing our working families. We saw a 7.6 percentage point decline in the number of working families in Boston over the last decade. Boston is becoming a city of the very well-to-do and the poor who can afford, who can be housed in subsidized housing. We still have large questions about our transportation system that became evident during the snowstorm. We've been writing editorials or op-eds for 20 years on these issues, and not much has been done. So the more I heard about the bid for the 2024 Olympics and the way that leaders such as John Fish and Dan O'Connell and now Aaron and Doug Rubin and others have been talking about this, is that I began to think that, well, maybe, just maybe, this is the kind of big, brash, exciting project we need to get people to really think about the housing we need, the transportation we need, not so much to make sure the Olympics come off in the way we'd like to see it, but to solve a problem even before we have the Olympics, and certainly solve the problem after they leave town. And therefore, I was very excited to be able to add this evening to the open classroom on the 21st century city challenges and opportunities, because I think this both poses a mammoth challenge and it poses a mammoth opportunity. And the ability to think about how we can use this bid not only to raise issues about the Olympics and the city and its future, but to solve real day-to-day problems is what I'm really excited about. So we're going to begin first with Erin Murphy, who I've gotten to know over the last 6 months, the CEO and Chief Bid Officer, who's been working with the Olympic Committee almost from the beginning. Doug Rubin will be here very soon, and we still hope, if he gets done early enough with FinCom, that Rich Davey will be here before the end of the evening. As in the past, and every open classroom we've had, we'll begin with about 45 minutes to an hour of presentations. We'll take a brief break, and then we're going to have open Q&A. Let it fly, and let's see where we go. Without further ado, Erin Murphy.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. As Barry mentioned, he and I have gotten to know each other a bit over the past 6 months, and I'm the president. I would love to be the president of the Barry Bluestone fan club. I just think I've known of Barry for many years. There's a great deal of respect in the community for Barry, and I just am so proud to be here and associated with this group. So thank you very much for having me. I think that probably you have all read a lot about the Olympic bid and the people on the team on the Boston 2024 staff in the newspaper. I just wanted to say a brief word about who I am and how I got involved in this. I am from Medford, Massachusetts originally. I grew up in a family that was very hardworking, very much blue collar. My dad was a laborer. My mom was a switchboard operator who often worked at night and overnights. I'm not from a privileged background by any means. And when I was presented with the opportunity to get involved with the bid, I frankly, similar to Barry, was a little bit skeptical about, what this could possibly do for the people of Greater Boston, and in particular, folks who may not be of a certain income level, because generally the impression is that folks who get to go to the Olympics or participate in the Olympic Games are generally wealthy people of privilege. As I started to learn more about the idea behind the Boston bid and what the plans really were in terms of legacy for the Greater Boston area, I was hooked. I think that this is a huge opportunity and a mammoth challenge as well. You're absolutely right, Barry. But a huge opportunity for this region, and I mean everyone in this region, to be impacted and have a lasting legacy because the games have come to Boston. The first sort of memory I have of the Olympic Games is 1984 when Mary Lou Retton won the gold in gymnastics, and I wrote my first book report in 4th grade about her, and I've been dreaming about the Olympics ever since, but I never really thought they were necessarily the right thing for Boston. And now I'm totally convinced, and I'd like to take a few minutes to present why I'm totally convinced, and obviously, as Barry mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers and criticisms and feedback and input and all of that as well. Some of you probably read in the paper on Monday, in both the Globe and the Herald, we took full-page ads out to demonstrate Boston 2024's commitment to our future. You probably have read some of these, but I'd just like to highlight just exactly what we are committing to the Greater Boston area and the Commonwealth of Massachusetts in pursuing the bid for the 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. One, that hosting the Games is consistent with the future of Boston and Massachusetts and leaves both better for hosting the Games. So all about legacy. I'll get to that in just a bit. 2, tens of thousands of good-paying jobs are created for residents leading up to and during the 2024 games, and that is absolutely critical to our bid. We wouldn't be bidding if that wasn't an opportunity for this region. 3, thousands of affordable housing units are created as a result of the games, and I know that Bluestone will be a great partner in holding us accountable and making sure that we live up to that commitment. 4, the 2024 games serve as a catalyst for improvements in transportation and infrastructure that benefit residents both pre and post games, and that's another area where I know that Barry will want to be a great partner, and we welcome that. 5, the games create opportunities for transit-oriented mixed-use development in the city of Boston, and I think there are some really exciting urban development opportunities that we'll talk about in a little bit that will be legacy benefits of hosting the games. 6, there's a clear and measurable plan for the inclusion of women and minority-owned businesses in all aspects of the 2024 games, which is extremely important, which I will make sure we hold ourselves accountable to. 7, education and youth sports opportunities are created for the young people of Massachusetts, and I can honestly say that there's a cadre of Olympians and Paralympians who are committed to making that happen. 8, a sophisticated plan, including multiple layers of insurance, is put in place to protect the city and the state from financial risk. That's a huge concern for people here, and rightfully so, and we want to make sure we de-risk the bid as much as possible. 9, the federal government designates the 2024 games in Boston as a special national security event and pays for the security costs. Frankly, if the federal government doesn't step in and pay the security costs, not only can Boston not host the Olympic and Paralympic Games, but no city in America can. It's too much of a financial burden for a state to take on. And 10, a majority of people in Massachusetts support bidding for the 2024 Olympic and Paralympic Games. And as you may have read in the news yesterday and today, Boston 2024 is very much in favor of a referendum to make sure that the voters are heard and that we are clearly demonstrating a majority of support in the games, or for the games, otherwise we will not go forward. A couple of notes on planning concepts, and I am not an architect. I wish David Manfredi, who is our chief architect, could be here because he's fantastic at outlining through the planning principles, but I'll just highlight these very quickly. 1, environmental, fiscal, and social sustainability. That's key to every venue in our plan. 2, walkability and accessibility by public transit. We are very proud to call this the most walkable games in the history of the modern Olympics, and we intend to make sure that there is a transit station within walking distance for the vast majority of the games. We don't want to create one new parking space for the games. We want this to be very much a walkable event. 3, legacy value for Boston and the region, which we'll talk more about, but that's really the centerpiece of our plan, and leveraging existing venues. We are very lucky to be in the nucleus of higher education, arguably in the world, and we have a lot of opportunity to use existing venues, not create venues we don't need or would have to take down afterwards. And finally, this is proof of concept. This is what we've been saying all along. We are still in that phase. However, we are about to transition once we go through the next 20 weeks, or I think we're in week 6, Doug, of the 20 public meetings in 20 weeks, and gathering as much input as possible. And we will transition from there, from the proof of concept phase into the real sort of planning and blocking and tackling phase when it comes to the venues. Just a quick note about where we're really looking in terms of placing the venues. There are 2 key clusters. One is the university cluster, and the other is the waterfront cluster. The university cluster is absolutely crucial from a number of different perspectives. We're proposing that there will be some events at Harvard University in the Allston side in particular, one or 2 events at MIT. The whole area of Beacon Yards continues to be developed, and that's a huge opportunity for us, and also at Boston University. Please don't let this look like Northeastern won't be involved. I think that there's a lot of other opportunities in addition to venue opportunities for every college and university in the region, and Northeastern is an extremely important part of that. So we'll talk about that in a bit as well. The other cluster being the waterfront cluster, that is where we propose our village to go at UMass Boston. The Midtown area, which is currently called Widett Circle. I don't know if anybody's car has ever been towed in Boston. Mine has a few few times more than I would like to mention when I was living in the North End in particular. And so that's actually not very far from here. It's off of 93 if you're coming up 93 North on Frontage Road. And that's a whole area, about 80 acres of redevelopment opportunity that we would propose to put a temporary stadium for the opening and closing ceremonies and track and field. And then the South Boston waterfront in general as well as a key part of our plan. A few words about the games budget, and I think there's a lot of confusion about this, and I want to sort of be able to lay out how we look at the budget and answer any questions that you may have in the Q&A session, because I think, like I said, there's a lot of confusion. The operating budget of the games, which includes the temporary venue construction and operation and the operations of the games themselves, that's where we're projecting that to be $4.7 billion. And the revenue for that will come from 100% private sources, sponsorships, TV revenue, and ticket sales. Historically, what the U.S. Games have produced is a surplus at the end of each games, and we expect and will plan for the same. Our hope is that we'll have enough money at the end of the games to reinvest into the community, youth sports programs, and focus on education and youth of the city. The non-operating budget, which is the non-OCOG budget, is probably where the most confusion lies. That's where the Olympic Village, the International Broadcast Center, and the Olympic Stadium site infrastructure, not the stadium itself, but the infrastructure around the stadium comes in, and that comes in at about $3.4 billion. That's through public-private partnerships. That's essentially areas that will be redeveloped for long-term legacy that the games can sort of fit into, be a tenant for 6 to 8 months, and then go away. That's, projects that are paid for and delivered and owned by others. That's not public money. That's not part of the OCOG budget either. It's sort of a public-private partnership. It's basically capital. It's a CapEx budget, a capital expenditure budget. And then the security budget, which I mentioned earlier, that we're projecting to be about $1 billion. I think that's the largest budget in the history of the U.S. Games, because just the nature of the world that we're living in today, unfortunately. But historically, what has happened for U.S. Games is that a national special security event is designated, and that money comes from the federal government, not unlike what happened when we hosted the Democratic National Convention in 2004. So the total, $9.1 billion, that is only public money coming from that would be the security budget piece, which is federal dollars. Transportation plans. I know this is a very important area, and I know there's been a bit of confusion about this too, because I think there has been talk about the Olympic Games requiring a lot of transportation infrastructure upgrades and investment in order to deliver the games, and I want to dispel that myth, and I think we were responsible for not catching that early, so apologies for that. But essentially, what we have already invested in as a community, as a region, it has been enough to be able to deliver the games, and including the Central Artery Project and the Boston Harbor Cleanup, expansion at Logan, and whatnot. What we view going forward is that the same plans that are taking place now, the same investments that have been identified by the state legislature that are required to operate as a state and required to operate as a world-class region, are fantastic projects that maybe the games could be used as an accelerant for, in order to make sure we have a deadline in place that we can actually deliver these projects, including the upgrade of the T, which I think we've all been pretty impacted by this winter, and aging infrastructure, the planned expansion of South Station, which is a long time coming, the extension of the Green Line, and rail service linking the Back Bay and the Boston Convention Center. So, a note about the responsible delivery of the games. This is, a lot of folks have asked, is this just going to be a runaway train? We know how other public projects have worked in the past. Is this going to fall into that same category? I just want to remind folks that this will be a privately driven project, a privately led project, and the accountability and deadlines that would be in place are just like any accountability and deadline sort of incentives that happen around private development projects. So rigorous planning, very disciplined project management. A note about Olympic Agenda 2020, this is actually coinciding very nicely with the Boston bid. The International Olympic Committee outlined reforms in this past December to encourage a more sustainable games and more fiscally responsible games. Obviously, they've been a bit bruised by some of the games of recent times, including Sochi, and that people just had a sort of a bad taste in their mouths after the costs associated with those games. I think that the IOC has taken a lead in making sure that that responsibility is key, that prudence is key in terms of bidding for the games, and that's fantastic for Boston because we wouldn't be bidding if the IOC didn't want that kind of a delivery. So we're, I think, at the right place at the right time. And of course, I mentioned the insurance. Boston 2024 has taken out a layer of insurance for the bid process, so we can insure against any kind of penalties if we decide to withdraw our bid. And we would do the same thing if in fact, we are designated in 2017 by the International Olympic Committee to host the 2024 Games. If we decide after 2017 that we want to withdraw our bid, we would take out insurance. Prior to that, we would take out insurance to mitigate against any kind of penalties if we decide to withdraw from there as well. A quick note about legacy, and again, this is a big part of the motivation behind the Boston bid. Before we sort of officially threw our hat in the ring, we had very in-depth conversations with leaders of past bids in Los Angeles and Atlanta and Salt Lake City, as well as London and Barcelona and other countries around the world that have hosted games in the past. And what we found was really pleasantly surprising. In the case of LA, they had a $232 million surplus at the end of the games from their operating budget, which they were able to reinvest in the community through LA 84, which was a foundation that was created post the games, so that is still in existence today and continues to give grants and donate money to youth sport programs throughout the greater LA area. And Anita de France, who is an Olympian rower, is actually running the fund out in LA, and she's gotten very involved in our bid and has given us a great deal amount of information on best practices and how to create a foundation around the surplus of the games. So it's been a really fantastic learning opportunity, and we're very excited about taking the LA model and even building it to a greater level. Atlanta in 1996 had a $10 million surplus. Salt Lake City in 2002 had a $56 million surplus. In Salt Lake City, those profits were returned to the community as well. On the economic benefits for Boston 2024, I know that there's been some news about an independent research report that was done by the Boston Foundation, and they found that in the years leading up to the games, there'd be 24,000 employment jobs, about 1,900 jobs per year, and a $4 billion economic impact leading up to the games, which we were very excited about. The games operations themselves requires 50,000 jobs, which is fantastic, and would create a $5 billion economic impact. And in terms of tourism, an uptick in to the tune of 4,300 jobs and $514 million in additional tourism income. One of the things we learned about the games in London, which I'll get to in a minute, is that they superseded Paris for the first time after they hosted the games in 2012 to be the #1 tourist destination in the world. So we're excited about that opportunity as well. Legacy of prior games, social benefits. In LA 84, like I mentioned, they've given back over $200 million back to the community. In Atlanta, the Aquatic Center transitioned into a community recreation center, which is another opportunity I think that Boston could definitely benefit from. They've also revitalized their downtown around Centennial Olympic Park. If anybody's been to Atlanta, it's quite amazing. Salt Lake City, 2002, 138,000 school children attended the games for free. And that is something that Boston 2024 is absolutely committed to, making sure that Boston public school kids and other kids from around the region would be able to attend the games for free. Quick note about the Cultural Olympiad, which is another huge opportunity for Boston, and I think we could probably do this. Well, I humbly say I think the greater Boston region, the Massachusetts region, could do this better than anywhere in the world. But the 4 years leading up to the games, what is required of the host city is to put on a Cultural Olympiad, and that requirement is from the International Olympic Committee. And that would attract local artists from all mediums, dance, actually the cultural institutions that are getting involved right now are sort of informing how we would put on a Cultural Olympiad, because it's something we've never done before. So area museums from the greater Boston area all the way out to Western Massachusetts, and actually it's now starting to pique the interest of cultural leaders throughout the New England area want to get involved in helping us create a really robust, exciting opportunity to highlight and spotlight artists. Not just 4 years before. We'd like to take it even further. We'd like to start actually building this now and rolling this out now. Whether or not we win the games, I think this is a huge opportunity to spotlight our arts and culture community. Get involved. I think you all know how to get involved. I think there's a lot of folks in this room who've already been involved from a pro-Olympic side and from a anti-Olympic side. But this is our information. Also, if anybody ever has any questions that they don't want to necessarily ask tonight, you always feel free to email me directly. I'm at emurphy@2024boston.org.
Well, this was the first time I got to see this presentation, and I am very pleased to see the direction that the Boston 2024 Committee has been moving. As you could tell, as I said in the introduction, my concern about the Olympics was that it would be a diversion from the things we want to do in Boston, from housing and transportation to arts and culture, to improving our education of our kids and providing new venues for them. And I think that the Olympic Committee has done a very good job so far in listening to the feedback from community leaders all through Boston and have incorporated it into their plan. But of course, there's still a lot to be done, and there's a lot of questions still to be asked. So let's just take a quick 5-minute break, stretch your legs for a second, and then we're going to get into it. We also have Doug Rubin here, who's working with the Boston 2024 Committee, and the three of us will entertain your questions. So just 2 or 3 minutes of a break. We'll set up here, and we'll begin your questions and answers.
Hi there. I am one of Barry's students. My name is Ryan Olson, but I've also been doing campaigns in Massachusetts as well. So I'm curious, when you're going about this referendum, how much are you approaching it as like, oh, it's there for people to express their thoughts, and how much are you viewing it as a political campaign to win over hearts and minds?
Great. Thanks for that question. We're 24 hours after the announcement, so some of this is very kind of preliminary thinking on this. But our thoughts on the referendum were pretty simple in that we believe that that the best way to go about this is to spend the next 12 to 18 months focused on meeting in the communities. Aaron mentioned we're doing 20 plus meetings around the state. The mayor has 9 other meetings that he's done in the city of Boston, and we're doing many others on top of that. To take those meetings, try to engage with the public, try to build the best bid we can. There'll be some changes based on the input we've already got. Some really good changes, I think, which will strengthen the bid. And I believe if we do that work and we're sincere about it and we work hard with the community and we build a real strong bid that reflects the best of Boston and Massachusetts and the Olympic movement, that we will have a pretty strong argument to make when we get to the referendum. So right now we're focused on the civic engagement part of the campaign and really not focused on the referendum. But hopefully it gives people some assurances that they will have a chance at the end of this process to say yes or no on this, and that's what we think is a benefit of the referendum.
My name is Arthur Robbins, long-term graduate of Northeastern University. One question particularly, and I think you may have touched on it just now. Who takes care of the shortfall if there isn't a surplus and there is a loss? Who is paying for that? And second of all, would the committee be willing on a referendum to indicate to the inhabitants of Massachusetts that no tax money would be used if there is a shortfall?
So I'll just take the first piece. In terms of a shortfall, I think there's a lot of confusion about overruns, and I think that past Olympic Games probably have added to that confusion. As I mentioned, the operations of the games are completely privately funded, so that would be taken care of by private funding sources. But in terms of past games that have been sort of labeled as having cost overruns, they're actually there's it's a bit of a misstatement. And in the case of London, their budget increased, their costs increased, but their revenues increased as well. So they made pointed decisions about how to change their budget based on what they wanted to achieve. I think that's been labeled a cost overrun, but it was, again, the private funding of the games, the revenues increased as well. So we're really not concerned about shortfalls because, again, it's a privately funded event.
I would just say to the point that you raised about the language in the ballot question, we are reaching out to stakeholders now. As I said, it's been about 24 hours since we made the announcement. We have talked with No Boston and Chris Dempsey and others over there, and we're going to reach out to them, to the Attorney General, Secretary of State. We want to make sure that whatever we do passes constitutional muster so it can get on the ballot. And we will work with the stakeholders and come up with language very soon on that.
Would you be able to say a little bit more about the insurance policies that you mentioned, Aaron, about if the games were canceled?
Sure. So this is actually a model that was created in Chicago, which bid for the 2016 games, didn't ultimately win. Obviously, it's going to be held in Rio, but it was the first of its kind sort of model that we're sort of borrowing from. And essentially, as part of our bid city agreement with the U.S. Olympic Committee, it requires that there's a payment made to the U.S. Olympic Committee in the event that we pull out of the Olympic bid between now and 2017. We took out an insurance policy paid for by 2024 private money to mitigate against that. So in the unlikely event that we do pull out of the bid between now and 2017, we have an insurance policy to make sure that fee is covered. And the same thing would happen in the next phase. So if we are awarded the games in 2017 by the International Olympic Committee, a host city contract needs to be signed, and in that contract it will likely say that there would be a fee or a penalty associated with pulling out after 2017, and we would take out an insurance policy to mitigate that against that as well.
Question over here. Go all the way back. Who are you?
Hi, I'm Sean Cuff. I'm a former student of Professor Bluestone, and my question is, with Governor Dukakis out in California and my working with him last year, I know he'd be pretty upset with me if I didn't mention probably his favorite phrase, North-South Rail Link.
North-South Rail Link, absolutely.
So you outlined a few of the transportation infrastructure projects Boston 2024 would be interested in. And I noticed the South Station expansion, and kind of just rolling a question off that. How much are you looking at existing projects, proposed projects, and kind of attaching yourself to that? And how much are you willing to open up new opportunities and new investments?
Well, we love Governor Dukakis. As I mentioned, his son narrated our videos, and he's been fantastic. He's been a great advisor, and he was very helpful in helping us sort of think through the best way possible to secure the bid, the initial, the domestic bid, which we won on January 8th. He's been fantastic. He's been very honest with us as well. North-South Rail Link is extremely important to him, and he really would like to see that at the center of our transportation sort of agenda. It is actually not necessary to deliver the games. Achieving that is not necessarily, important to delivering the games. And it's not part. Obviously, it's not part of current plans that the state has in terms of transportation infrastructure upgrades. So it's not necessarily within our wheelhouse. But we are very supportive of the governor. Love him dearly, and we have vigorous debates about the topic often. But it's a great question.
Kathy Jacob, a transportation planner. How this all of a sudden has come on in the public? How many years has this committee been working under the covers, not getting things arranged and talking about it and saying, wouldn't you like to put something over here? A little transportation, little improvement in the Fairmont line, something like that. And not to mention all the other little things that you're going to have to knock down to get built. How much have you been under the covers?
I would just answer that by giving you just a little bit, if you bear with me, a little bit of history of how this came about, because I think it's not well known, but it's actually a real good example of civic engagement at its best. This came about because two young people had an idea about bringing the Olympics to Boston, and they went to their state senator went to a state senator and said, hey, we have this really interesting idea we want to explore. What do you think? That state senator, Eileen Donahue from Lowell, filed a bill. That bill became a commission, which was populated by the governor and the speaker and the Senate president, and asked people like John Fish and Dan O'Connell, who used to be with Boston 24, to participate in that. They had, I think, 7 meetings, legislative meetings about this, public meetings to talk about this. They decided, they came up with a report that they published that was public that said Boston could actually handle this, and this is worth at least looking at. And that's what led to the formation of Boston 2024 and the work we've done. So what that kind of process has played out over a while. Boston 2024 has been at it as a result of that legislation, I think, for about a year now.
We opened our doors as a 501c3 on June 2nd of 2014. And the legislative commission that Doug just mentioned was formed in the beginning of 2014. And again, it was started by 2 just eager citizens who were about 28 years old.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bruce Cohen, and I'm a student of Barry Bluestone's, and also his brother-in-law. I wanted to ask a question about housing. You know, that the Olympic Village housing that I've seen historically doesn't seem to fit the model of being transformed into permanent moderate and low-income housing. Could you talk about how that'll happen?
Well, sure. Well, first of all, we're all a student of Barry Bluestone, right? But it's a great question. I think that one of the areas where we're really going to rely on our partners like Barry Bluestone. I humbly say that, Barry, without your permission, but we're hoping so. There's a huge opportunity in the innovation space for creation of modular housing, particularly for the village. And a lot of times when we say modular housing, there's sort of a negative connotation to that. But it's really state-of-the-art, fantastic, very well-equipped kind of housing that would be used for the athletes on the campus of UMass Boston. And sort of what we're proposing right now is that once the games are over, you could leave some of that housing for students, and then remove what UMass doesn't need or want for their students, and place those units throughout the city, and to create affordable housing opportunities for residents of Boston. So it's a new space in terms of the innovation around modular housing. We've seen some really fantastic presentations on where that whole space is going, including from students at Northeastern. It's really fascinating. It's not my area of expertise, so I can't really get into it in great detail, but we are have a lot of really smart people at the table from Northeastern, from MIT, from Harvard, who are thinking about where the whole modular housing space is going and how we can employ that for not only the Olympics, but for the legacy piece in Boston as well.
I just want to add one thing to that, because this is, I think, a good example of where Boston 2024 has tried to learn from past Olympics, and where people have done things right and where they may have kind of done things that maybe weren't in the best interest of the city. But my understanding from some of the past Olympics is that a lot of organizing committees tried to turn the Olympic Village into affordable housing afterwards. And one of the issues they run into is that it's just too much affordable housing in one area. So it floods the market and is not the best use of that. And so one of the things we tried to learn from those past issues is there a way to do this and to use some of the things that Aaron laid out to try to take that housing and put it in other parts of the city where it is needed, where it could be workforce housing, or, middle income housing, where it could really kind of help achieve the mayor's goal of 53,000 new housing units over the next number of years. And so that's one of the lessons we've tried to take from past Olympics and improve upon.
If I could just add a little bit to that. I've had a group of our students here at Northeastern University for the last year, not social scientists, not economists, not public policy folks, but architects, all of whom have now graduated and gone on to very good jobs with architecture firms. And they've been working with me and a number of architects throughout the city, Ed Inc., Tamara Roy, and B.K. Boley. We've been talking with Stullin Lee, David Lee, about what has happened over the last decade in terms of new technologies for building really attractive, highly resilient, and durable housing that in fact can be put together and then taken apart, almost Lego-like. There are projects like this going on in New York right now, where there's housing units being built. The Brooklyn Navy Yard. There's some new stuff going on in Sweden. There's some new stuff going on in Europe that we're all looking at. As some of you know, last week we had a very successful release of our 12th annual Greater Boston Housing Report Card, in which we called for 10,000 units of housing for quote-unquote young millennials and others like them, including, I hope, myself. Very much the idea behind building that housing ties in with the Olympic Village. And part of my reason, going back to what I said at the beginning, is we've been trying to fight for this since 2002, when we first put out the first housing report card, with very little success. And I think linking the mayor's goal of 53,000 units, many of them being smaller or mixed units of different sizes, fits in very well with this. Now, originally, if I remember correctly, the Olympic Committee, when they first thought about this, said, well, we'll use dormitories around the city. We could use some of Northeastern's dorms. And I think for security reasons, that just became impossible to do. The IOC, the USOC, the IOC wants all of the athletes and the trainers to be in one location where they can guarantee their security, particularly after Munich. So we think we can use this bid to really galvanize a lot of attention around the kind of housing we're going to need, particularly for young people and, by the way, for seniors. And we've got some beautiful models that we're starting to develop. I actually have a meeting with Sheila Dillon, the head of DND, Department of Neighborhood Development, and her entire staff this Friday to talk about moving forward with the housing plans in the housing report card, which tie in with the Olympic Village. Next question? How about over here? We'll get to everybody's, don't worry.
Hi, my name is Peter. I'm one of Professor Bluestone's students, and I had a question. So the two big circles were sort of around Harvard and MIT and around sort of the waterfront. So these are areas that don't really need economic development as much as maybe the outskirts of Boston. So maybe the Dorchesters, the Mattapans, the Roxburys of the world. So my question would be is how would this sort of help development in the areas that really need it?
It's a great question. I think one of the things I probably didn't touch upon enough or at all, if I remember in my presentation, is there's a great opportunity. We feel that it's a great opportunity. Well, it's up to the community to decide whether it's a great opportunity at Franklin Park. And obviously, it's fantastic. It's the second oldest public golf course in the country. There's a white stadium over there that's in great need of renovation that probably won't get it otherwise, frankly. And there's been a lot of talk in the community about a need for upgrading that whole area for kids. Maybe a pool would be fantastic, athletic facilities and whatnot. And so we are actually very focused on trying to include Franklin Park in the discussion. We would propose hosting one or two events at Franklin Park, largely equestrian events. And we're going through a community process right now to make sure that the folks in the Franklin Park area are comfortable with that. There's a lot of concern and questions about what that actually means for the community, but that's a great example of an area that we identified just through conversations with stakeholders early on as a unique opportunity for development. The other area for development that's a great opportunity is the area I mentioned at Midtown, which is called Wedette Circle. Currently, there's no residential there. There's definitely a few businesses there for sure, but there's a sort of a tangle of a combination of mostly public or quasi-publicly owned land, and definitely some privately owned land. But it's probably not the best use of that space. And as we have this conversation with key stakeholders, what we're learning is that, particularly from folks from around the country, that the whole Wedette Circle area could actually be the most exciting urban development opportunity in the country right now. 80 acres of land within the geographic center of the city that we could potentially put affordable housing, mixed-use housing on that site. And we could also knit together South Boston and the South End, which currently is a bit disconnected. So point well taken, but we're really looking for opportunities to invest in communities through the venue process, but not just the venue process. We clearly want to make sure that every community in the greater Boston area is impacted in a positive way.
If I could just add something that I should have said about housing, but it ties in with your question. One of the things we talked about, of course, was housing. Another was transportation. But one thing that the Dukakis Center has been particularly interested in, we're doing a lot more research in this area, is workforce development, and particularly workforce development among younger people who are likely not to spend 4 years at Northeastern or Harvard. We're going to be coming out with a massive new vocational education study projecting occupational needs through 2022, a little bit before the Olympics. But one of the things that our architecture friends have been talking about in terms of manufactured housing is actually building a manufacturing facility in the city. We actually had a video that I think we showed here of building such a facility in the New Market area, where we would produce a lot of these units here. So we're actually producing housing in the city for what will be residents of the city. And we've been already begun to talk with some of the crafts and the building trades, the unions, about their interest in working with us on that plant, and also having some of their craftspeople, train a whole new range of folks, particularly from Roxbury and Dorchester, Mattapan, in these new construction techniques. We figure there's at least 10 to 15 years worth of work there, and at very, very good pay for jobs that don't necessarily require 4 years of education, post-secondary education. So not only are we looking at the housing, but we're also looking how to produce it in such a way to provide a very large number, probably hundreds, if not in the early thousands, of people with jobs over the next 15 years in producing housing in the new facility. Do we have anybody over here? Right here. Please tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is John Shields. I'm an architect, urban designer. I'm interested in the open space infrastructure. But my question is one of clarification. Aaron, in your table that laid out the cost breakdown, you had one line item that had public-private partnership as the main supplier of the funding. And then you said that it was going to be privately funded. What is the public side of the public-private
Sorry
partnership?
for that confusion. It is a little bit of a misnomer, I guess I should say. But this happens a lot. These kinds of situations happen a lot in the case, say, of Massport, where they maybe own the land and lease it back to private developers, and so that is exactly what I meant. The land at Wadette Circle is currently owned by largely a public entity. The land at UMass Boston is owned by UMass Boston, which is a public entity. And so we could see being a tenant, there would be development that they would have in their master plan anyway, that we could be a tenant for 6 months during 2024, and then give the land and buildings back to the entity after is all said and done. But we would be rent-paying tenants, so the mixture of.
But what you're saying, just for clarification for everybody, and I think this reinforces your argument, you're saying that the public side is an in-kind rather than a dollar contribution. Is that correct?
Well, that's right. I mean, these are legacy projects that the city wants anyway, or that UMass Boston wants anyway, would likely do without the Olympics coming to Boston in 2024. So I think that the mayor, I don't want to speak for him, but I know the mayor's having a lot of interesting discussions right now with potential developers for the Midtown site, for the Wadette Circle site. And whether or not the Olympics go forward, those conversations are taking place with and without us, mostly without us, because again, it's likely going to happen anyway. So you're right. There's a little bit of confusion around what public-private partnership means and who's sort of on the hook at the end of the day. So thank you for asking that question.
Perhaps I can add something, and I'm not speaking for Boston 2024 on this, and I may be wrong. Doug, you correct me. One of the big issues is how are we going to fix our transportation system? And the fact is the Olympics can't pay for that, and shouldn't, because this is a long-term process. We've tried to find ways of paying for this many times. We raised the gas tax, and then by referendum we got rid of the increase in the gas tax and so forth. My previous associate director at the Dukakis Center, Stephanie Pollack, now the Secretary of Transportation, has been, strongly in favor. Whatever her boss thinks may be different. of trying to find funding, additional funding for public transit to improve the Green Line, the Orange Line, the Red Line, new stops, extend the Greenbush into Somerville, all those things. That's another one of those things that we've been stymied. We have the bonding authority for it, but we can't spend any of the money because we don't have the tax revenue to service those bonds. I would hope that part of the legacy of the Boston 2024 bid is to reopen this question about the need for public transit, combination of the bid in this winter, to be able to upgrade what is one of the, a public transit system which is in such dire need of repair, and that this will take additional tax dollars, but not for the Olympics. It's for the transportation we need, but the Olympic bid may give us some greater oomph in getting more people to recognize the importance of making that transportation investment. Is that way off from what you guys are thinking?
I think it's maybe getting a little bit far ahead of where we're thinking on
Okay.
this, so I don't want my silence to say that we are endorsing that. But I think that Governor Baker has a big challenge on his hands, and he's got a commission that he's put in place, a very respected kind of group of people, and he's going to come up with a round of recommendations. If the Olympics can serve as a catalyst for that discussion, then we are obviously very happy to have that. Even to this point, in our community meetings, there have surfaced some potential improvements that these communities would like to see that were not part of our original proposal and we don't need, but have been surfaced as part of this discussion and probably as a healthy part of this. And so our hope is that we work with the governor, with the mayor, and as this conversation goes, that Boston 2012 can be a partner that helps to move that conversation forward in whatever way they decide to make sense.
Over here.
My name is Vasilis Zanis. I live in Newton and work at Boston University. And I spent the first 25 years of my life in Greece.
Possibly a little closer.
I had the privilege of
Possibly closer.
I had the privilege of seeing the developments that happened as a result of the Athens Olympic, and then live the magic of witnessing the Olympics when they occur. Now, regarding the developments, there was a debate for 40 years or so to create a metro system in Athens. And it only happened because of the Olympics, okay? So the upgrading of transportation system was fantastic. When the Olympic Games took place, you could go from one end of Athens to the other without any difficulty at all, and still the system is there. Then the magic of the Olympics, I think it is a magic experience for everyone to witness the Olympics in his own state. It was a continuous festivity happening during the Olympic Games in downtown Athens. There was a parallel movement to connect the Olympic Games with what they call with Olympic truce, so that wars are stopped during the 15 days of the Olympic Games. It was a fantastic experience for me to have. Now, regarding the housing that is very dear to Dr. Bluestone, I think this also, the Olympics can be a catalyst for this development to occur. And if it does, then we'll give the opportunity to poorer citizens temporarily to attend the Olympics. And then this housing can be used to meet the needs of the students, of the many students of the 100 universities we have. I think the benefits are so overwhelming any kind of fear or risk for the Olympics. I hope I'll be alive to witness them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the comments. I just wanted to build on the first part of that because And I understand why, and it's a very important part of the process, but we have spent a lot of time recently talking about process and how and a lot of the things. But sometimes we forget some of the magic of the Olympics, and I've been very fortunate as part of this process to be able to sit with Dave Silk and Micah Ruzioni and talk a little bit about their experience at the 1980 Winter Olympics and the Miracle on Ice. To be honest, even more kind of impactful to me, I had the chance to go to a community meeting in Cambridge last week. There was a Paralympian there who was blind who told an amazing story of how the Paralympics kind of allowed him to kind of grow and succeed and to do what he's been able to do, and almost brought me to tears. And so there is that piece of it on both the Paralympic side and the Olympic side that I hope doesn't get lost in all this conversation about benefits and legacy and cost, and very important stuff. But it's really, I'm glad you reminded us that there's that other piece of it all that's really a big part of this.
If I could add just one little thing to this, I am someone who really likes athletics and fortunately had a son who was a very good soccer player. But one of the things that I found exciting about meeting some of the Olympians is they look like normal people. I mean, if you go see Vince Wilfork, who's we're losing him, I mean, he's gargantuan. And if you look at the typical NBA basketball player, they are twice my height. But I visited with a racer, or ice racer. I forget her name. Who's working with you?
You have to narrow it down.
She's one of the ones who won. who was on the U.S. Ice skating racing team.
Racing team.
And I met her at one of the things. And she what?
Speed skater.
Skating.
Who's a speed skater?
Yeah, she was an Olympian at one of your events. You
Great.
were with me.
Great.
And the thing is that she looks like a normal person. And one of the things that I would love to have is have literally tens of thousands of our young kids in Boston public schools meet Olympians from all over the world who will not look so strange to them as human beings, that they can do, great things and not have to be this, 6 foot, 9 inch forward for a basketball team. Yes.
But to your point, Barry, I think it's a great point. That's one of the magic of the Olympics. Is something that I was surprised by in joining this team. I think I was so focused on sort of the nuts and bolts of putting together a bid. And when you're sitting in a room with an Olympian or a Paralympian, it's pixie dust. It's indescribable, the inspiration, and hearing how a lot of these folks have started training since they were children and trained all throughout high school and gave up educational opportunities to represent their country.
Be careful about that. I'm at Northeastern University.
No, but here's another, it brings me to another point. It's a good point, but it brings me to another point. There are a lot of Olympians and Paralympians who have competed on the U.S. team, who gave up the opportunity at the traditional age to get an education. And we see a part of the Boston Olympic bid and the legacy for the Boston Olympic bid and Paralympic bid as maybe perhaps we can convene our higher education community here, and Northeastern does this better than anybody, to create educational programs specific to educating athletes who have represented their country in past games. And so it's a great point. Actually, we are in active discussions with many universities, including Northeastern, about that legacy piece. But back to your point, sir, the magic of the Olympics is something that, and I've actually never been to a games. My colleague, Sarah Carruthers, who's sitting to my right, has been to a games. And the first time I heard her speak about the games that she went to, where she got very emotional talking about what an amazing experience it was, had me hook, line, and sinker. I can't wait.
At the end of the games, you feel proud. You are a citizen of the city that hosted Olympics. Very proud.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Over here? You'll be next.
Hi, I'm Norm Gorin. I'm a fan and friend of Barry's and Doug's, and now hopefully Eric. Economist Andrew Zimbalist seems to be a regular contributor to opposition editorials. I'm curious as to why he's motivated to do that so much, and whether Barry Bluestone will be having regular op-ed counterpoints to his. One of the recent ones was a question about whether the stadium itself will be a white elephant. All right, so I'd be interested to hear your comments on that.
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of comments. One, in our current plan right now, the stadium is a temporary stadium, so it will definitely not be a white elephant and will be removed for potential development at Woodette Circle, whatever the city and the community decide is the best, most appropriate use for that, whether it's affordable housing, retail, mixed use. I mean, that will be a decision by the city and the community about that. So there is a real potential legacy piece that our program will open up in that part of the city. Andrew Zimbalist, Professor Zimbalist, look, I think anybody who raises serious, legitimate questions is an important part of this process. And so I had the opportunity to go on a show, Jim Braude's show with Professor Zimbalist, and we had a very good, open conversation. There are a couple of interesting points that he agreed with, as we brought up, and he will reference that there are some Olympics that have done it right. And in particular, he talks about LA and Barcelona. LA because they use temporary facilities to keep the cost down, and Barcelona because they wove it into the long-term plan of that city. So the Olympics benefited the long-term plan of that city, opened up their port, and really enhanced that city. And as I have said repeatedly, temporary facilities, based on the Agenda 2020 that the IOC put out, and weaving it into the long-term plan of the city are the cornerstones of Boston's bid. So I actually don't think that we are that far apart from Professor Zimbalist. He does raise a lot of other Olympics where, there have been issues, and we have tried to learn from those. But on those two, those are the cornerstones of our campaign. And so I don't think there's as much ground between us and Professor Zimbalist as it might seem in the media on this. And we're really working hard to try to learn from those past Olympics.
I've known Andy for more than 40 years, and we've collaborated on some things. I think what Andy is raising is a fear that if we do it wrong, it can be very costly and we don't get the benefits from it. And that's certainly true. Sochi, the Beijing Olympics, I was there just before it opened, and they put I don't know how many hundreds of millions of dollars into the Bird's Nest Stadium. Beautiful piece of art, but not really the right thing to do economically. And so as two economists, I think we can probably say, here are some ways to do this in an effective, efficient manner. We're not producing art for, the centuries. We're producing an Olympics game. What we hope to be doing is producing infrastructure for the city that will last 100 years and make the city a better place. Over here.
Hi, my name is Chris Ho. I'm a teacher. I was Barry's son's teacher many years ago.
Where?
At Cambridge Friends School, second grade.
Oh, right. Good to see you again.
Yes, it is. It was nice to catch up with your wife.
With honors from Northwestern because of you.
Oh, it was clear. And soccer. I'm a soccer. So I've been coming to these meetings. I live in Jamaica Plain. I also say I work with the Southern Poverty Law Center through my work. I founded and directed the Jamaica Plain Youth Soccer Academy, which works with 1st through 4th graders. It's fee optional. It's in the neighborhood near Franklin Park. I volunteer, and it's not about like that bit, but it's over 20 weeks a year, over about 20 hours a week. I don't get paid. We have 150, 200 kids that directly participate. We could do a lot with one day of the salary that Deval has declined. I really care about sports. I want kids to play, but the Olympics isn't about sports. The Olympics is a party for the elite. I know that you can celebrate whatever, and the Olympians do give up everything. If they get injured, they're done, right? I sat in a parlor with a child who wants to be a pro soccer player, and I said, but if you break your leg, you have to stay in school. And that's what we need to promote. We have Boston Public Schools, 30% don't have PE. I appreciate Mr. Fish's work to provide equipment in the school system, but you're not looking after it. I'm the one who calls and has JPro come and fix the goals that break. That long-term isn't there in this. And I also want to have to say, Barry, that someone said you may have drunk the Kool-Aid. I think you've drunk the Kool-Aid on this. This is a distraction. This isn't how you get development. You get organizing people in the communities to demand what they need. And you don't put a deadline on so they can the developers can fast track things. That's a problem. That's part of the motivation between the millions of dollars that are funneled into this, and the $300,000 salaries and the $140,000 salaries and all of that, and the $27,000 ad in the Globe. The whole presentation, I was at Franklin Park, I was at Cambridge, I've been reading all this stuff. You're disingenuous. Boston 2024 is disingenuous. They are not speaking the truth to us. Taxes pay the federal government will have to pay for security. That's taxes.
Right.
It's not, yes, but the way you talk, oh, no tax dollars involved.
I've never said there were no tax dollars involved in the federal funding of security.
I do appreciate that earlier tonight you said you were going to do everything you could to de-risk as much as possible. You can't de-risk entirely.
Correct.
And so we're stuck with this.
Incorrect.
Yes. Well,
but I understand
we'll see.
your
also,
concern.
it's disingenuous to call this sustainable when you're going to build stadiums and tear them down. That's not sustainable. When you're going to build add on to White Stadium and then tear it down.
Can we respond to just some of your points before we lose track of them? Sorry, sir. Just to start a little bit earlier, unfortunately, there's no athlete here who's participated or trying to participate in the games, but I think they would strongly disagree with your statement that the Olympics is not about sports and that it's about a 3-week party for the elite. I think, frankly, you're entitled to your opinion, but I think that's very disrespectful to the athletes who are training and who are trying to compete in the Olympic Games. I have to say that. And as I said before, Boston's model is we want to have as many people go to the games, kids, people of all economic opportunity or all economic income level be able to participate in the games themselves, but also the activities leading up to the games and the games afterwards. So I don't appreciate being called disingenuous. I feel like that's a bit of a character assassination, frankly. I'm up here trying to be as open and honest as possible. And I think it's fantastic that you're a soccer coach and you volunteer. I volunteer in the community often as well. I'm a big sister. I care very much about the kids in the community, and I think we share that commitment.
So the other piece, Wydett Circle isn't just the place our cars get towed.
No, absolutely. There are businesses
That's how you
there.
presented in Cambridge, and you presented it. Remember Wydett Circle? That's where your car gets. Was that a direct quote? Yes.
That's a direct quote, but it's because nobody knows where it is.
There are 700 jobs there. It's where
Yes.
our food comes in and goes out. And we're going to build something, then tear it down and be a blank slate for developers?
I only said that the car tow thing because generally when we say Wydett Circle, the vast majority of people don't know where we're talking about, and that's an easy way to sort of make a point of reference. Of course, there are jobs there. We're in very active discussions with the folks who are running businesses there and who are working there, and so I think we're in the same exact place on that.
So I also, comparing the Olympics to Barcelona and LA, that's pre 9/11. That's a different world. I live near Franklin Park. I use Franklin Park. The equestrian would be as much of a disaster to Franklin Park as it was in London, where the Guardian reports that Greenwich Park ruined by London 2012. And people have said it's a week. Don't worry, it's just a week. No, it's months of preparation. It's using an inner city park for, maybe other people aren't the elite, but the horses there are worth more than anyone in this room. Well, maybe I don't know everyone, so, but and you say, Franklin Park, no one's asked for a pool. When that was announced at the meeting at Franklin Park as a legacy, people in the room said, who wants a pool? Now, maybe not. You also said today that White Stadium won't be fixed up. Well, Mr. Fish had a plan to do that a couple of years ago. That was tabled. But are we saying that if the Olympics doesn't go forward, Mr. Fish is not going to proceed?
I'm not saying that at all.
Okay. But that's what was said. Also, you're going to have a public process that when is that going to happen?
Honestly, on that one, I need to really push back because, and I respect the fact that you show up at these things, and as a grassroots organizer, and that's my background, I think it's great that you do, and I appreciate that, but you've been at a few of these, and we will continue to do these as we go forward.
I'm talking about Franklin Park,
So,
because we're going to be there.
I hope that you will. I would like to just.
I want to say, you say it's a unique, when asked earlier, where are we going to do good things? This is a unique opportunity for development. This is what happens when outsiders go in and decide what's right for a neighborhood. Let's see what the neighborhood's working on for that.
Let me answer that, okay? Hold on one second. You know me well. Many of the people in the room know me well. I've been working for more than 20 years to get affordable housing built in this city. It's been a disaster. We have not done that. Prices of housing continue to rise, and the price and rents continue to rise at a point where we now have 26% of everybody in Boston, Somerville, and Cambridge who rent.
I was speaking specifically about the Franklin Park neighborhood.
All right, I'm talking about the broader community, and much of this is in the Franklin Park neighborhood. We've done it census tract by census tract. What we need is to try and do something different. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again to try and get the housing built that we need, we're going to have failure over and over again. The reason why I believe in this, and I don't think I've drunk any Kool-Aid, is that I think the people who are running Boston 2024 and the mayor of Boston and the Republican governor of this state and the Speaker of the House and the Senate President and others are genuine in their desire to use this bid to solve these problems in ways we've never done before. I've seen community process. I've been working with communities all through Massachusetts, not just in Boston, over 100 of them out of 351 towns and cities. Over and over again, I find you need something big, exciting like this to get us to do what we need to do otherwise. And that's why I've supported this, because everything else I've tried has failed.
The last thing I want to say is that 2 points is you can make commitments, but you're not elected. As you said, this is privately promoted. I forget the word.
Funded.
Well, you said, I have the quote, privately led. You're not accountable. You weren't elected. There's no way we can hold you accountable other than your good name. And so there's no accountability for this. And the last thing I want to say is, the thing is, the no side hasn't even started organizing, and you're already down there. So watch out when we start organizing.
Look, as I said to you before, somebody who is an organizer, if that is the case and what we did yesterday, and people will have an opportunity. But I just want to push back on a couple of things. But first, I want to be clear. I really do honestly respect the fact that you come to these, that we can have this kind of back and forth, that we can sit here and talk, and maybe at the end of the day we're still going to disagree, but at least we can have that conversation back and forth. That is my understanding of what a public process is. So a couple things. One, you said there would be no accountability. I want to push back on that. We know there will be a referendum in November 2016. November 2016 will be a presidential election. It will be the highest turnout we'll probably have in any election over the next 2 years. So the most people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts will have the opportunity to come out and vote up or down on this if we can prove our case or not prove our case. In addition to that, you said we're not elected. That's absolutely true. The mayor of Boston is elected, and we cannot move forward without his signature on the paper. So that will happen. That is accountability, and that is very much of accountability for us and for everybody else in this. We have to prove that. In addition to that, there's another layer of accountability, which was just recently announced. The governor, the Senate president, and the speaker have hiring a consultant to come independently review our numbers. So they will have an opportunity, the elected governor, Senate president, and the speaker will have an opportunity to review our numbers independently and come to a conclusion about whether we are right or wrong on the merits of this argument. That's another layer of accountability. And one last point I wanted to raise, in particular around Franklin Park. We believe that there's a real opportunity there at Franklin Park. But we have been on the record in multiple papers and have said that if we cannot convince the community of that, and the community does not want us to be there, we will take that venue and move it somewhere else. That is accountability on our level, okay? And we have been very clear about that as well. And so, as you say, the community, I agree, the community knows what's best for it. We have a plan, we've presented it, we believe in it, but if the community is not there, we will take that and we will move it somewhere else. And that has been our public commitment since the beginning of this process. And so I just want to push back. I would love to be able to continue this conversation, to have back and forth. I'd prefer to do without being called disingenuous. But I want to make sure that we're able to have that conversation back and forth on a regular basis. And we're going to continue over the next 20 plus weeks and further as we move out in this process.
Go over here. We've got a number of questions over here.
Hello. Hi, my name is Jordan Wingenroth. I'm an environmental science major at Northeastern University. I'm in my junior year. I guess the first thing, just a quick note to begin with. If you want to make the campaign not seem like something that is a privilege for the elite, starting talking about a wealthy privilege like owning a car and having it towed might not be the best way. That aside, moving on, that aside, I think that
it was not a great car, just for the record.
it's a car. That aside,
I own one too.
I don't. I can't afford car insurance. So that aside, I guess the main point of what I'm trying to get to. So I think me and Barry shared an acquaintance, Daniel Faber, one of my favorite professors at Northeastern University. And he's actually the head of the Environmental Justice Research Group on campus, which does excellent work. I'm an environmental science major, so that's
and he was one of our speakers in last semester's.
Yeah, I was here for that too. That was excellent, yeah. Currently in Boston, there are much higher disease levels in low-income communities. There's poor waste management in low-income communities, and the two are connected incontrovertibly. So if anyone who's been to a Red Sox game or a Patriots game and has witnessed the number of people in that stadium, you might not think about it at the time, but it takes a lot of infrastructure to allow something like that to happen. Waste management, public transportation is one aspect of that, but there are a lot of other much more pragmatic, perhaps more unpleasant means that need to be adapted before something like that can happen. And I think that having the Olympics in Boston would make the Patriots game, a Patriots game or a Red Sox game, seem like small change. So I guess my question is, and I know it's kind of a sweeping topic change, and it might not be your area of expertise, but would we be able to improve living conditions, and especially in the realm of waste management, community safety, and other aspects such as that by bringing the Olympics to Boston? Or would we be making things worse by bringing the tens of millions, if not, I might say hundreds of millions of, probably tens of millions of people that would come along with the Olympics for the period when they're going on, and all of the waste, all of the management that would have to come along with that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your question. You're right about the fact that this is definitely not my area of expertise, but it's clearly yours. And one of the things that the 2024 group is going to be rolling out in the next couple of weeks is an outline of our committee structure. And we are going to have a committee that's focused on the environment and sustainability, and we would love for you to be part of that. We have folks who clearly know a lot about this topic, who are committed to it, but again, I'm not the expert, but we would love for you to, and folks like you who have a great interest in this and who know a lot about it, to participate and help shape that area of the bid. So
I hadn't even thought about the environmental impact. But again, part of the reason why I've gotten excited by this, and the Olympic Committee, as far as I can tell, has been open to this, is that as more concerns about the current state and the future state of Boston and Greater Boston come up, they've been setting up committees and they've been addressing those issues to see if the Olympic bid could not help us pull together people around those issues in order to push that agenda further. And in fact, you know, I hope we get the 2024 Olympics. But even if we didn't get them, but because of this effort, We made improvements in our environmental protection, particularly in the inner cities, where there's a very close relationship between the lack of environmental injustice and disease. If we can make progress because of this bid, that's why I'm very much supportive of it. And I think that's going to be an area that's going to be very important. Another question over there, and then we'll come over here.
Hi, my name is Christine Hernandez, and I'm an undergraduate here at Northeastern. I'm a comm studies major and a political science major. I have a question regarding the Long Island Bridge and the Long Island shelter. You were talking about working with women specifically and different groups to make this Olympics like sustainable for them. What about the homeless community? I mean, they're the ones affected as well by the closing of the Long Island shelter, and considering that the mayor himself said that they wouldn't transport 450 people but are willing to transport 7,000 spectators, speaks a lot to the legacy of Boston 2024 if we don't have dignity for the homeless community.
Well, I think we share that same sentiment that, of course, the question was about essentially, it kind of was a two-part question, but the question was essentially, how are the homeless going to be protected or promoted through the Olympic bid? There's a homeless shelter that was vacated from Long Island, one of the harbor islands, because of a structural problem on their bridge. And I think there's some confusion about the fact that shelter's been vacated. It was actually because of a structural problem on the bridge, but a few people have thought it might have been because of the Olympics. That's not at all the case. It's completely separate. And I think that, this is something that we're at the very beginning stages, but if the Olympics could be potentially a catalyst to get the bridge fixed and to sort of get and to be able to reinstate some of the programs that were out there, I think that's a fantastic opportunity. I think all of us share the same concern for the homeless, and by no means will the Olympics impact the homeless population in a negative way.
The only other thing I would add to that, and we've talked a lot about it, but the potential for the Olympics to spur affordable housing would be another impact that would obviously help the homeless community.
It's not just the people who are homeless, it's people who are housing insecure, who are a paycheck away from becoming homeless. And then the major reason for that is our housing costs are the third highest in the United States. They're going up faster and faster. We do not have enough subsidized housing. And what we need to do is build enough new housing that we start to slow down the growth in prices and particularly rents, so that more people who are housing insecure will become housing secure. Again, this is not the purpose of the Olympics per se, but to the extent that the Olympic bid helps us galvanize people around the issue of housing and affordable housing, that's what I think we can use this Olympic bid to do. Over here.
Hi, my name's Anusha. I actually work in Roxbury. I work with an education nonprofit. But this actually has nothing to do with my question. But as an athlete, I grew up as an athlete in Boston. I used to swim, and I've switched over to running now. And I know we were talking a lot about the nuts and bolts of this and kind of a lot of the cons. I'm very undecided myself about the Olympics, but growing up as an athlete, and now I'm fortunate enough to be running the Boston Marathon next month. I think that my question is, what are you doing to kind of capture the magic of the Olympics? And I know I've read a lot of articles about finding a story. And for me, like, Boston Marathon is like the race of all races. And so kind of like plugging my own interest in here. But just like, how are you going to be using sporting events, such as Boston, that for 119 years has really symbolized kind of the effort and training so much, so many of us put in Boston. We're known to be a running community, things like that. So kind of just to talk about that a little bit. And at least for me, like, I find the Olympics to be like such a magical thing, being an athlete myself.
It's a great question, and it's the most fun part of the day when I get to meet with athletes and we're planning for events like the Boston Marathon and what kind of a presence Boston 2024 will have, how we can activate our volunteers to help volunteer at the Boston Marathon, how we can get our Olympians and Paralympians out at the event. Many of them are actually running the Boston Marathon. I have to say it's a little bit tough on the ego when you're surrounded by elite athletes most of the time. These people are amazing, and yourself included. Congratulations on running the marathon. But there's a huge opportunity, and it's not just for the city of Boston, but it's for 351 cities and towns across Massachusetts to elevate sport and to connect sport with kids and to reinforce the power of sport, and not just the traditional sort of professional sports that we grow up knowing very well, football, baseball, etc. But, fencing, perhaps, archery, unique sports that a lot of people don't have exposure to except when they watch the Olympics every 2 or 4 years. So we have somebody actually on the team who is actually an Olympian. He's actually a Northeastern graduate. He's a rower who is actually going to be joining us in a few months. It's not public now. He's probably going to kill me for saying this out loud. But he is going to be tasked with making sure that we get out to every community who's interested in having an athlete host a sports clinic in a school, making sure that every public school in Boston has an opportunity to learn from athletes, hear inspirational stories from athletes, try out new sports, have exposure to sports that otherwise they wouldn't really have exposure to. And it's a huge part of our bid. And it is the magic part of the bid. But there's a huge opportunity there, and there's actually a committee. I'm going to be recruiting a lot of people in this room. There's a committee dedicated to that as well, or we call it the Olympic and Paralympic Movement Committee. And it's made up of Olympians, Paralympians, amateur athletes, non-athletes, and they're just trying to, the primary focus is connecting sports to the community.
Just want to add one thing to what Erin said. I think one of the reasons, at least one of the reasons the USOC told us that they chose Boston was because we had a very athlete-focused proposal. And so the athletes have been at the center of kind of our development, our bid process. We've been very, very fortunate to have someone like Sherry Blauette, a Paralympian who actually won the Boston Marathon multiple times, be a part of that and help lead that effort and make sure that athletes are part. And so she very much understands the experience that athletes have when they come to the Olympics, whether they're going to win gold medals or whether they're just trying to do a personal best and get through the Olympics and celebrate with their friends and family. And that's been a part of our bid and really kind of been a wonderful piece of it as we move forward. And I think one of the strengths of the Boston bid.
Yeah, I just want to follow up too, just to say that I know these discussions are going to go on for so long, and I'm sure they're going to get, people are going to tear them apart. But at the end of the day, athletes are athletes. They're in it for the sport that they play, and they put years and years of training into it. So it's sometimes upsetting to hear so many people tear it apart when people this is their dream. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Over here.
Hello. I have a two-part question.
But you got to first of all tell us
who am I? My name's Damon. I'm a recent graduate from Northeastern. The first one is pretty much a yes or no question. When you're talking about relocating these building units, will there be a specific emphasis on relocating them to, which areas will they be emphasized on being relocated to? Will they be low-income areas, or will they be unused areas, or where is the focus on relocating these building spaces?
That will be determined by the mayor and the city and the communities. I mean, that will be a process that Boston 2024 will not lead, obviously. And we will work with the city and the communities to make that determination.
I just had a concern because I guess the question would be, what would they be doing in terms of gentrification? Because you're having these new units being built for athletes who are presumed to need a certain level of space and comfort. And when they're relocated, especially to a low-income area, how would you ensure that they don't cause a significant amount of gentrification in areas when you're putting a lot of new units into a specific place?
Let me answer that question as an economist and somebody who studies housing very closely. The reason for producing a lot more housing is to reduce the pressure on rents and therefore eliminate much of the displacement we're now seeing in Boston, in Cambridge, in Somerville. The major reason, the major way that you reduce gentrification is by producing sufficient amount of housing of modest size and of modest cost in order to provide enough housing units so that demand does not outstrip supply. That's true in all of our housing work. When we think about the Olympic Village and the possibility of 8,000 units of housing, 2 athletes or 2 trainers to a room, we're talking about a significant amount of housing that will probably work most particularly for graduate students, medical interns and residents, and other what I call young millennials in the position we put forward last week for the creation of what we call millennial villages, a term we used before we even heard about the Olympics here, so that there's a compatible use between what we're trying to develop for that particular demographic, which is now doubling, tripling, and quadrupling up, particularly in the older housing stock, the triple deckers and so forth, and just making it impossible for working families to live here. So that is precisely the reason for this kind of housing to reduce that problem of gentrification.
Just want to say to the people who have mics, there's people in the back who've had their hands up forever. I just want to make sure we get to them as well.
We'll get to them. Let's do one over here and then all the way back there.
Hi, my name is Kate, and I'm a student of Professor Bluestone's. I commute every day from Medford, and I know the value of a parking space. For communities all over New England that want to see this event in Boston, will most likely drive in. Where would they park, or what is the parking structure going to be? And I'm talking about communities from like Lenox, North Adams, to Burlington, Vermont, to, I don't even know, Bangor, Maine. It's not hard to get down here in less than 2 hours, but then where are they going to park to enjoy these games?
It's a great question, and I think that what's really interesting in another area or another topic within the area of innovation that we're really just learning about now is this whole area of dynamic ticketing, and how there's now technology that you can basically, if you get a ticket to the games, it actually designates where you should park if you were to park, usually at a train station somewhere in the region, so that you're able to take the train into your venue. It's a great question. It's something that we're just starting to study now to make sure that there isn't undue pressure on the communities. But like I said before, in terms of the actual sort of direct surroundings of each of the venues, there won't be any parking spaces necessary to create in order to deliver the games. We're really promoting the use of public transit. And in terms of the athletes themselves, they're transported from village to venue on secure buses. But it's a great question, and I think it's something we're just starting to study right now.
Thanks for the question. Up here.
Hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a resident of East Fenway. I just have, say, three parts to your question. I'll try to be quick. One's process, one's public funding, and one's planning. On process, I wanted to build on a question of someone earlier. I believe her last name was Jacobs, who was asking about kind of the process of last year. And in Doug Rubin's response seemed to make it seem, let's say, more of an open and transparent process than it had been. There was, as he noted, the feasibility commission that was created by the legislature, which ran, I believe, until May. It had been staffed with a mix of political operatives, construction, real estate CEOs, and tourism CEOs. But then once that ended, and then until the bid was submitted, there were no, say, formal forms of public engagement in terms of community meetings in the actual development of the bid once the feasibility had been established. And that process was governed by a committee that was, let's say, a committee behind closed doors without releasing the bid or, as noted, formally engaging the public. The second thing gets to public funding. One question I have relates to the definition of public funds. Earlier today, the Globe reported that Massachusetts provided, I believe it was $3 million in tax breaks to Amazon for moving moving a plant or like a warehouse somewhere. When we speak of public funds, it could mean just the state allocating, like appropriating money for something. It can also mean tax breaks. It can mean cost at, let's say, very reduced cost municipal land and other things. And so how is that defined? And building on the pledge of no public funds, would Boston 2024 support a yes on the referendum proposed by Josh Zakim for this year? on no public funds used, or Evan Falchuk's referendum for next year on no public funds used, to put force of law behind that. And then the last thing related to the discussion of Barcelona, which they had planned for, I believe it was 25 years. You can check me on that, but it was a several-decade process of planning that began at the end of Franco's reign until the Olympics. And that's a lot longer than what Boston has been planning. Insofar as Boston has a long-term plan, it could be potentially what comes out of the Go Boston 2030, which is ongoing, and it's also privately funded, led by the Barr Foundation, which has funding ties to Boston 2024. So there's not really like a pre-existing plan in place for the Olympics to be built into, as there was in Barcelona.
Thank you.
Where should we start? Want to talk a little bit about the referendum? And then
Yeah, look, we believe that the best way to do the referendum would be, and as what we proposed yesterday, would be November 2016, because we believe at that point it'll be the highest turnout and the most people will be able to say, and we will get a very clear kind of yes or no with as many people as possible coming to the polls. I think from a public policy perspective and from our perspective, that would be the best result. And so that's what we proposed yesterday, and we're going to work with stakeholders, including Chris Dempsey over at Boston Olympics and others, the Attorney General, the Secretary of State, the legislature, the governor, the mayor, to try to make sure that we put a question on the ballot that is, the most transparent and clear, so that we get a clear answer on this on this question. That's where we are on this. I don't know where to go next in terms of the. Trying to think what is next.
well, just the note about Barcelona, I don't know how I actually should find that out. That's an interesting point about the long-term, the number of years it took them to plan. But I do know we have had a lot of conversations with the planners of the Barcelona Games, who are now very distinguished elderly men and women who have fond memories of the process leading up to the Games and the Games themselves. And before we decided to actually go forward and make a bid, we did have a conversation with those folks, and they were so emotional about the lasting impact that the Games have had on Barcelona. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think that was really what won us all over in terms of making the decision to move forward. When you hear these folks talk about how Barcelona was, near and dear to their hearts, it was their hometown, but not necessarily visited by tourists, not necessarily viewed by the world as it is right now, and how the Olympics really took Barcelona to the next level. And, I'm a very proud Bostonian, and I feel like there's no better city in the world. But we all have room to improve, and we all have room to grow. And so, similar to the Barcelona model, if the Olympics could be an opportunity for us to take our city to the next level, I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and it's something we're really learning a lot from Barcelona on.
Unfortunately, we're almost out of time, so let's do non-transparency. Okay.
Sorry. So in terms of the non-transparencies question, this is something we've been we've said several times since the bid was since we won the bid, and since the bid was submitted, and since we won the bid, that we have been very committed to transparency this whole time. We had to, in order to get this far, we had to follow the process of the USOC, and also follow the process of making sure that our proof of concept plan wasn't shared with the other cities who were also competing for the bid. I think that all of the cities had to adhere to the same process. Frankly, that because it was a proof of concept plan, it was not making specific proposals that were ironclad to place venues and communities without the community input. We really considered it a first draft, and so completely understanding that the transparency issue was a problem. We fully own that. But it's something we've talked about time and time again, and we are, before we won the bid, we committed to going to every single community who would have us and telling the story, and obviously there's an opportunity to have conversations like this several times, almost every day. We're in a public setting, having these kinds of conversations. So your point is well taken. I think we've addressed that multiple times.
Right, and to your point, Rich Davey, who is not here, has I think says, and I agree with him, that people in Massachusetts, people in Boston expect you to come early and to come often. We didn't get the early part right, but we are definitely going to get the often part right. And we are going to come often as we can, and have as many meetings as we can, and take as much input as we can so that we can put together the strongest bid. And at the end of the day, we're going to make that presentation to the people of Massachusetts and the people of Boston, and they're going to get a chance to determine whether we delivered on that promise or we did not.
I'm afraid.
Hi, I've already been handed the microphone. I've had my hand up for an hour, so I think I should just forge ahead. My name is Dr. Edmund Schlussel. I'm a member of Socialist Alternative and I live in Somerville. When I attended the the Boston Olympics public meeting in Southie, I raised a question about what Boston 2024 would do to address the welfare of sex-trafficked people. And I was shouted down, booed, and told that the question was not appropriate. I also have a quote from your committee member John Fish saying, "We should not be intimidated because of issues that we have not yet 100% arrested. There will always be deviant behavior in any community." So I'd like to ask, firstly, will you condemn the behavior of your supporters at that Southie meeting and the behavior of your committee members at that Southie meeting? And is Boston 2024 willing to engage, now that this is being taken up in the city council, a fact-based discussion about the impact of the Olympics on sex trafficking and the welfare of the people affected by that?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. I've been waiting for 3 weeks for that.
Very good. Well, I want to thank our guests tonight, Aaron Murphy and Doug Rubin. I think that this was precisely what a great university does, to engage in conversation over issues that have many different sides and many different aspects. I am thrilled to see the Olympic Committee engaging with our community, engaging here at Northeastern with all of us. When we first established the open classroom in the spring of '08, we've had over 1,700 people come through as guest students. My goal in establishing that with my colleagues here at Northeastern was precisely to have evenings like this. This is what democracy is all about. It's about raising tough issues and tussling with them, and then finally, in the end, putting them up for a vote to see who's convinced whom of what. So I want to thank you so very much for doing precisely what a great university should do, and for being with us this evening. And thanks to all of you for your wonderful questions, and we'll continue. Next week, we are going to take up the issue of climate and sustainability. Professors Matthias Ruth, the director of the School of Public Policy and Urban Affairs, and Professor Joan Fitzgerald, one of our esteemed faculty, will be leading a conversation about this whole question of climate change. It's going to be fascinating, particularly when you see Matthias Ruth's new slides where he's been looking at the impact of sea level rise, and you'll be able to find out whether you will either be underwater or be new seafront property by 2050. See you next Wednesday, same time, same station.